Hey, good morning, guys. I want to just go over what we've done so far. We've covered chapter 23 prior to our quarantine. We skipped chapter 24. We just got done covering chapter 25 last week, and this week we're going to cover chapter 26. Now, there is going to be a test, and I use that term very loosely, so please do not get worried. Over those three chapters and the main idea that comes from each one of those. But again, do not worry. It is a different kind of test, and it is very much modified than what we would have done in the classroom, okay? And plus, you get to use your sway, so I think you guys will be golden. All right. This lesson in this chapter, lesson 1, is about the Qing dynasty, and the Qing dynasty lasted a very long time from 1644 to 1911. And two things really led to their decline. And the first one was a humongous, ginormical population boom. So 400 million people in China in early 1900, and there was not enough food. And so people were starving to death. And I'll tell you what, that is the same story today, because there are people living in the rural parts of China that do not have enough food. So here's the quote. It says, "Not a year passes in which a terrific number of persons do not perish of famine in some part or other of China." It is the same story today. The other bigger part, too, of this is the West. We saw in the last chapter how Britain and France are like, hey, let's colonize in Southeast Asia. Okay, bonjour, I will colonize Vietnam. And Britain is like, okay, I think I will colonize Singapore at the bottom tip of Malaysia. Oh, and while we're at it, we will just go ahead and colonize Burma. And the whole point in doing that is just so they could get closer to China. Okay. And so Britain is like, yeah, we'd like some more trading ports. And China's like, no. Well, that really ticked off Britain. Okay. Because at this point, they only had one small one in Guangzhou. And China wouldn't give them any more. They're like, it's not fair, China, what you're doing to us, because we are importing your tea, silk, and porcelain. And the only thing you're taking from us, the only thing we're exporting to you is cotton. And when you are importing more than you are exporting, you have a trade deficit. And so China's like, well, that's the way it's going to be. You owe us money. And you will pay us in silver. Britain's like, this is not fair. And they're like, we've got to find a way. You have got to accept more of our exports. And China's like, no, we don't like your Western ways. We don't want your Western stuff coming into our country. And so what you read about last week in e-learning were the Opium Wars. And so Britain had already colonized India at this point, and that is where opium comes from. And they're like, you gonna tell the British no? We will find a way for you to accept more of our exports. And we're going to start exporting opium to you. We're going to get your entire country addicted to it, that you're going to be accepting our exports, and then we're going to balance our trade out to where we no longer have a trade deficit. You talk about detrimental, because literally the entire country is high because of Britain. In fact, it was so bad that the Chinese emperor wrote a letter to Queen Victoria and said, suppose there were I do that every time. Suppose there were people from another country who carried opium for sale to England and seduced your people into buying and smoking it. Certainly your honorable ruler would deeply hate it and be bitterly aroused. Dude, everybody's high. Everybody's addicted. And it's destroying China. And so then you get into these two wars. You have the first Opium War and the second Opium War. China lost both of them. But here's the crazy thing. China is being destroyed internally because of Britain. And then you look at these results right here. So they lost the first one. So China lost the first Opium War, and this is what the consequences were. The Chinese had to open up 5 more ports to the British. They had to limit taxes on British goods. China paid for the war. I think, what did they have to pay? Like $21 million in war reparations. And then look at this. China also had to give Britain ownership of Hong Kong. And if you're wondering where Hong Kong is, it's right there. And that's what it looks like enlarged. I mean, dude, China was like punished tenfold. And then the second Opium War, they also lost. The French got involved in that one as well against them. And they end up legalizing opium. They're like, okay. And then they open up more ports to the British. They give that British a peninsula. China was the big losers in this one, and I'm not sure it was well deserved. So those are our opium wars. And at this point, too, in China, you still have a large peasant population that does not have enough food. And so you're going to have the Taiping Rebellion. I thought this was crazy, but the leader right here, I'm not even going to attempt to say that. He was a Christian convert who viewed himself as the younger brother of Jesus. And God gave him this mission to destroy the Qing dynasty because the Qing dynasty was not taking care of him. And so he had certain steps. First one, he was going to capture this town, Yangon, and declare a new dynasty, the heavenly kingdom of great peace. Step 2 is going to be murder. So they went into, I think it was Nanking at that time, killed and massacred 25,000 women and children. And I'll tell you what, you just keep going with history. There's been a lot of hatred happening in the city of Nanking. There was so much going on here that one British observer said, there was no hope of any good ever coming of the rebel movement. They do nothing but burn, murder, and destroy. So here you have a group of peasants that are ticked off. And I'm Googling something, guys. Yeah, it said 20 million people ended up dying in this rebellion. Oh, I had it right there. All right. For 14 years. 20 million people. So you got a bunch of angry people because the emperor is not taking care of them. Is it justified? I don't know. So with all these ports open, you've got Europe basically descending on China. And they created what was known as spheres of influence. And these military warlords helped put down the Taiping Rebellion. Were basically making deals with these European nations, going, okay, this can be your land and you can trade whatever you want to within this region. And you can have the mining rights and all the trading rights in there. But we'd like a little cut of the money. You give us a little, we'll give you a little. And so what happened is you had all these spheres of influence set up. So you can see here's the Russian sphere, the British sphere, the French, the Japanese, the German, okay? And so United States, we're like, dude, this isn't equal. I mean, look at how much Britain has. And so our guy, we send John Hay in, and he comes up with this open door policy, and he writes this note to the British, the Russians, the Germans, the French, the Italians, and the Japanese, and he said, listen, we need to have trading in China on an equal playing field. We cannot have one country dominate the region. And so that became known as the open door policy, where trade became equal. Access to China became equal. So, United States, right? So at this point now, you got even more people flooding into China, and a large group are Christian missionaries. And you have the Boxer Rebellion, which their group was called the secret organization called the Harmonious Fists. Their members practice shadow boxing, which is boxing with an imaginary opponent, and they thought this would protect them from bullets. Okay. Their slogan was destroy the foreigner and anyone who threatened Chinese customs. They're going to take them down. And so they basically go on this rampage looking for Christian missionaries and Christian converts and killing them. Look at that. It says they roamed the countryside and slaughtered them. And so at this point, Europe has to come back in and stop the rebellion, and China has to pay even more money to foreign governments. And at this point, China is just straight up weak. They are very weak. And so that's going to leave the door open for even more rebellions and revolts until the country gets stabilized. I did like this cartoon here. And you can see all the world leaders here trying to figure out how to divide up China as being a pie. Of course, the Chinese leader back there going, "Hey, kidding me?" That's what happens when a country is weak and a country is full of resources. People are just going to swoop in, and that's exactly what they did. All right, again, I'm going to tell you, I miss you. I do. I miss laughing with you. But I hope, again, this video finds you well, guys. If you have any questions, holler at me, okay? Until we meet again, guys.